Hello and welcome to another AGS Inspire Flip Masterclass. This week's focus is takeaway homework. The first thing I want to do is to just go back to basics really with homework and just remind ourselves why we set homework and what the purpose of it is. First of all, it really has to add value, and we need to question everything we do if it doesn't add value in our class. It should also help to raise standards, and really we need to think about if we are setting homework and it's not raising standards and it's not adding any value, then why are we doing it in the first place? Hopefully, if it's done properly, it should be pre-planned. It shouldn't be a bolt-on. And by this I mean that we really need to go back to our medium and long-term planning and our schemes of learning and progress and look for the opportunities where this may lie, and find out where are those lessons within that 6 or 7 week block that actually would really benefit from an extended piece of learning time and some homework, rather than just setting it just because you feel you have to, or just setting it week by week and not really having any purpose. It should hopefully extend the learning time, and that can only be a benefit to our students if it's quality learning time, and hopefully the longer they're learning for will hopefully then have benefits in terms of how we're raising standards. And lastly, it should create independent learners, something that our school and schools all over the country are aiming for. We want our students to be independent learners, we want them to be resilient, we want them to be able to learn on their own and carry out research projects and all those different things, because they're the skills they're going to need in later life, not only when they leave our school, but also when they go into the wider world after college or university, or whatever the industry or profession they choose. So, setting homework. I want to throw a question at you now and say, well, as a teacher, do we need to really lay down the parameters for how the students are going to present their homework? Do we have to say, I want you to write an article, or I want you to draw a diagram, or I want you to write 2 or 3 paragraphs, or I want you to answer these questions? Is that the real purpose? Or actually, as teachers, do we just need to actually assess their knowledge and their understanding of the topic that we've taught them? And therefore, if the latter is right, and actually all we're doing really, what we want to do as a teacher, is assess their understanding. Have they picked it up? Have they got the knowledge? Have they learned it? Have they remembered it? And do they understand it at a deep level? If that's the true reason that we set homework, then what I want to put over to you is, with takeaway homework, why don't we give the students choice? Why don't we give them the choice of how they present the homework? And if they want to actually present it in a newspaper article, or if they want to present it in a video, or they want to create a podcast, or they want to do a comic strip, if they're actually getting over to you that they have the knowledge and they've understood it, then why is that a problem? And I think for too long we have been setting rigid structures for homework that potentially might disadvantage some students. You may have lots of students with very different talents in your classroom, and you may be disadvantaging some of them because of the structure and the style that you want their homework to be. So really, from a real kind of equal opportunities and differentiation point of view, this could be a huge bonus, and it also could produce some really surprising results when you actually open the choice up to the students. So, looking at choice, and this is something that we looked at when we talked about engagement, the second session of the year of AGS Inspire, and we looked at how we engage students. We talked a lot about giving students choice, because actually what it does, it gives them a sense of control, and they're in control of of their own learning, and once they're in control, they also then have a sense of responsibility, that they can that they're mature enough, and they can pick which kind of a task they want to complete, or how they want to complete it. And with that, there's also a certain degree of thinking that goes with it, that they have to think about, well, why am I choosing this one, or I'd like to choose this because I've got a certain skill set, and it starts to make them not only independent, but I think also responsible for their own learning, and really thinking about how they want to learn and what their skills are and how they want to develop. It also shows that you as a teacher have a flexibility, and that you're not rigid. You're not going to just say this is the way we're going to do it and that's the only way because Sir or Miss says we're going to do it. Actually, it brings out more of a personality for you to say, well, listen, you present it to me in any way you like, and that's fine. I just want to actually assess and measure your understanding. So I think that goes a long way with the students as well. And hopefully it becomes meaningful and motivating to the students because they've got that responsibility, they've got that sense of control, they're thinking more about it, And I think that that motivates a lot of students, and certainly with the takeaway homework that I've seen at Acklam Grange with 2 or 3 faculties that are doing it, and from seeing lots of teachers across the country and across the world use it, that comes back in droves. That the students are far more motivated, and there are such surprising results that come back from students who didn't know were that creative or didn't have those kind of skill sets, and teachers have been blown away by the homework they've got, and have found that it's been such of a higher quality that it's been very, very interesting. Right, here is an example, just to give you what is takeaway homework, what does it look like. I found an example here of the Number Ninjas takeaway revision homework, and what's happened here is we've got 17 different tasks that the students can pick from. They've been differentiated in terms of white belt, blue belt, and black belt. The white belt ones are the easier ones, and you can see there that that could be a generic kind of takeaway menu for a whole topic or for a whole year. And no matter what topic you're doing, the students can then say, right, well, okay, I'm going to do number 7. I'm going to design a homework for my parents, or I'm going to do number 12 this week, which is a podcast. And again, there's nothing generic there, there's nothing specific there about an actual subject or about a topic. It's very generic, and they can pick that as they go along. We've also got other people that have made a different take on it, and kind of gone with some of the food outlets that we've got in the country, and made it quite appealing. This one, for instance, has very similar. We've got some literacy starters, so they're kind of some of the easy ones. We've got main courses that are a little bit more difficult, and how they've differentiated this time, they've used a kind of pepper coding in terms of whether it's how spicy or how hot, I suppose, the dishes are. And again, it's just using a little bit more creativity. And imagine as a student yourself, imagine as a young person, if you were given this when you were at school and told you had choice, and you could see different ones to do, and you had all these different tasks that you could complete, and it showed you how hard they were. How much would that have inspired you and motivated you to want to do something a little bit different, rather than just the bog standard homework that the teacher tells you to do every week. We've then got another example here, a kind of Nando's version with the heat, the sort of heat on the left hand side, with again linking to differentiation, and students can then pick from different tasks across there. This one is slightly different, and we've now got it set into different dishes, really, in terms of different courses: appetizers, mains, sides and extras, desserts, drinks. And again, you may think, well, actually, I quite like that, because for certain topics, we may say you have to pick a dessert, or you have to pick a main course for this one, because it's quite a pivotal bit. But throughout the 2 or 3 weeks leading up to that, they may just pick an appetizer, which might be a 10 or 15-minute homework. The mains may be a little bit longer. The drinks might be even less, might be a 5-minute homework. Again, you can play around with this and be creative, and have different structures. And lastly, a Domino's Pizza one here, where they've got kind of different deals, like a carry-out deal and a taster deal. And what they've got to do here, there are different tasks within those deals, and it may be that over a 3-week period you've got to choose one of the deals, and you've got to do all of the different things in that. And again, I just want to show you these to show you how creative you can be with takeaway homework, and all the different ways that you can structure this, and the different ways that you can set tasks for the students. And it all comes back to the students having choice, taking responsibility, taking ownership for their learning, and really being inspired and motivated because of that. So on differentiation, we've looked at a lot of different ways there that we can differentiate it, from the level of spiciness or heat, or the different courses, or different deals. You may put prices next to them, and they may have to rack up £20. They may have to spend £20 on your takeaway homework menu by in 6 weeks, or there's a whole range of ways that you can differentiate it. And I just wanted to put on the screen there, we've already got a great kind of system in the school, a consistent system for our success criteria for gold, silver, bronze. And it may be that you think, well, actually we can tie that in, and we can have our gold dishes or our silver dishes or our bronze dishes, or the fact that dishes within different courses. So within the starters, you may have a gold, silver and bronze starter, because some of those starters, although they all might be fairly short activities, they may carry different levels of differentiation. Your main courses, for instance, your kind of mixed grill type of big meal might be your gold meal, And there might be some lighter bites that might be bronze meals. Again, have a think, lots of different ways to do it. I'm just trying to open your mind, raise your imagination levels, and give you something to think about. So, I really want you to be creative here, and I really want you to think about, well, how can this be used in my classroom? What have I got coming up in the next 6 to 8 weeks, in the next half term? What was I going to set homework for? Was it really inspiring? And I think it's a time to have a good look in the mirror and say, well, is the homework I'm actually setting inspiring? Is it motivating? Is it interesting? And how can we really make it really creative, and how can we make it exciting? And I think the staff who have already tried this at Acklam, and the staff across the world that I've spoken to that have tried it, have said that by being creative and by motivating the students, the completion rate from students has gone through the roof, the quality has gone through the roof, and everyone just feels so much happier with the homework setup, rather than it being a real sort of drag because students aren't doing it and you're chasing people all the time and kids don't like it, and it feels like a bit of an add-on rather than part of the learning process. So be creative, think about how you might want it to look, what kind of structure you would have in there, how you differentiate it, and yeah, just really open your mind to the possibilities. So when you are planning your tasks, there's some things I want you to think about. So you may have got a bit of creative thinking going in terms of, I know how I want it to look like, or I want to use a Domino's pizza one, or I want to create a new one for Acklam Grange, or whatever you want to do. But we need to think about, where are the opportunities for homework? Where do they sit within your scheme of work? Because this should be something that that's planned for. And yes, you've got your takeaway homework menu, but really it's got to be meaningful, and it's got to add value, like we said right at the start. You need to think about a range of tasks. What things would you like your students to do? And in the examples I showed you earlier, and you may now want to kind of pause the video or rewind it back to those examples that I put on there. Is it what range of tasks do you want them to do? And I suppose the important word there is range. There needs to be a range from easier tasks or shorter tasks to harder or longer tasks. And you need to also think about the hierarchy of those tasks. For instance, posters are a very low order thinking skill, for a lot of students. Whereas extended pieces of writing, reports, if you think about the Bloom's taxonomy of those higher order thinking skills, where does that fit in, and how can you maybe use Bloom's to kind of think about what sort of tasks you would do? Obviously, the more tasks you have, the more choice there is for students, and that may be a good thing. It may be a negative point for you. You may not want to give them too much range, but I think you need to think, where's that middle ground between having too many tasks that they can pick from, and they're looking at it for an hour before they pick one, and also you have such a range of things to assess. But also, if it's too small, then you're not really giving them that much choice anyway. And how can you differentiate it? What differentiating coding or language are you going to use? And how can you make sure that there is challenge for every pathway, for every group? But there's also some easier tasks, because some students may find a certain topic in your subject quite challenging, and it may be that they decide at that point, well, for this one I'm going to pick an appetizer, I'm going to pick a starter, or I'm going to pick something with a little bit easier, because I'm not that confident on this topic, even though I might be have a target of an A in your subject. This one is a little bit tricky, so I'll pick something a little bit easier. So make sure it's differentiated, make sure you've got enough range that students can feel comfortable within all the topics that you teach. And finally, things to consider. I want you to think about these before you come to the session on Tuesday, and it may be that you write some answers down and take some notes here, and really think about how this is going to move forward, because I'd really like us to move this forward and be very, very practical in terms of how we're going to design our menu on Tuesday night in the session. So the first thing is that really, can the quality of homework be improved by reducing the quantity? And what I mean by that is, by setting homework every lesson, or by setting it every week, what are we actually achieving? And just because we have 6 homeworks in over 6 weeks, does that mean the quality has been any better? Does that mean we've raised standards? Does it mean it's added any value? And if the answer to all those questions, or some of those questions, are no, we need to think about maybe reducing the amount of times we set it, but extending the opportunities for longer pieces of work. So those main meals that we talked about, they might not be done in one night. They might be done over several nights or a couple of weeks. But actually you get far more quality out of something that the kids are really engaged in than shorter pieces every week that kids do in 15, 20 minutes and they don't really pay any attention to. Right, what would make your tasks easier or harder? So in terms of differentiating it, well, what would make a main meal, or what would make a meal that had 3 peppers? You know, what is it? Is it the type of skill that they would do? Is it the length of time it would take? Again, these are questions for you to think about, and to think, when I'm designing this, you know, what makes an easier or harder meal? And also, why would a student want to opt for a harder meal? And this is a really good question. You know, why would anyone want to opt for a main meal when they can do a starter? And that's something that you need to think about, of how you're going to deliver this and how you're going to sell it to the students. I mentioned earlier that they may have to spend a certain amount of money within a certain period of time. So they know that they've got to probably pick 2 main meals and a starter over 3 weeks. And they can then choose kind of what's coming up. Well, I'll use the starter for the topic that I'm not that confident on, and I'll use my 2 main meals for the ones that I am confident on. It may be that that you kind of push people towards certain courses or certain levels of differentiation based on their target levels. Again, I'm not here to tell you how to do that. I just want to give you some deep thinking now about, well, you know, why would my students in my class opt for harder ones? Do you use the Vivo reward system to reward students for attempting harder topics? I don't know. Again, that's something that needs to be considered in this process. How will students receive feedback? Potentially, you could have 30 students doing 30 different tasks or types of tasks for homework, and there's therefore no set way of marking all of those. So you need to think about that, because you're not going to be able to compare and contrast between someone's homework and someone else's, because they might be all very, very different. So what type of how are you going to feed back to them? What happens if someone gives you a video or gives you a podcast, and someone does a poster, and then someone does a newspaper article? Again, all these things to consider. And lastly, how can you ensure that a breadth of tasks are completed over a period of time? You don't certainly want your students just picking those starters or those really easier lower order thinking tasks week by week by week. So how are you as a teacher going to monitor that and track that and make sure that your students are not only attempting homework tasks of varying difficulties, but also of varying skill sets? You don't want them to be doing the newspaper article week after week after week. You want them to be attempting different things and developing their creativity and developing their skills in so many different areas. So again, how would you do that, and how would you monitor that? Okay, that is it. That's what I'd like you to consider between now and then. If you want to find anything else, anything more about takeaway homework in the next couple of nights before Tuesday, what I would suggest you to do is to do one of 2 things. If you are on Twitter, search the hashtag takeaway homework on Twitter. You'll see lots of people talking about it. There'll be lots of images on there of people that are like the ones I showed you, different menus that people have got. There are blog posts out there on takeaway homework and how it's been successful. So again, get on there, do some research. If you haven't got Twitter or you don't want to use Twitter, then Google takeaway homework. Use Google Images. There are hundreds of different examples on there of people that have already used things. And I'd really like you to come to Tuesday's session with a little bit of an idea of how you would like to see this moving forward in your classroom. Maybe you're already bringing your scheme of work with you to say, well, here's the points that I think could be relevant for opportunities for homework in the next few weeks. Maybe already answering the questions I've laid out here in front of us, and then really to get to grips with this and to really try and move it forward and be creative and get something down. And I'd love by the end of the session for people to almost have a draft kind of takeaway homework plan ready to go, so that it can be kind of typed up, jazzed up, designed, everything else ready for after half term possibly. So thank you very much for listening. I hope you've had a bit of inspiration there in terms of how you can really make your homework come to life. And if you can bring all those bits and bobs and your ideas with you on Tuesday, then I'm sure it'll be a fantastic session. Okay, thank you very much.